Tuning in to the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing after shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hey there, Leftovers fans. I don't know how you're feeling right now, but my mind has again, somehow, for the 10th, 16th time, wherever we are, been blown apart. Guys, so thank you for joining us while you're stitching your mind back together. I'm your host, Zach Wilson, going to be the lead tonight to help you figure out what is happening around us. You can tweet at me throughout the week, throughout the show, at that Zach Wilson. Now let me introduce you to my fantastic panel. To my left, Kelly McInerney.
Hey, I'm Kelly McInerney. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HollyWeirdo.
Roxy Striar's here.
You guys can find me everywhere at Roxy Striar.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at Steve Kaufmann. That's Kaufmann.
I only introduced the ladies on this panel.
Fair enough.
Ladies first.
Yeah.
Steve can do his own work. All right.
That's sexist.
So, no. Anyway.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about this episode? This episode had a lot of just big make you think about this show as a whole moments to me. How did you guys feel?
I really like Nora. She's one of my favorite characters, Nora, and every time she has an episode, it just makes you realize how strong she is and like her more, even though she has flaws, she kind of in this episode we see a little bit. But yeah, and I liked that I just like learning about the new characters too, like Erica and stuff. But yeah.
Did you look at this as Nora's episode?
Nora and Erica's, I felt like, kind of, a little bit.
Kind of. Now, I think this is... If episode 1 was day 1 in Jarden, this is maybe day 3, realistically. Which is funny because it's episode 6. Because they had a lot to tell us to get us to here. Which, timeline-wise, is not that long a period.
You think this is day 3 of...
Figuratively, I think it's been longer than that.
Okay.
Timeline-wise, but I think story-wise, it's very early.
I don't know what you mean. Do you mean they've been in Yarden for 6 days or 3 days?
I think it's a hard J. I think it's Jarden.
Jarden?
It's Jarden.
Yeah.
It's definitely Jarden.
Jarden.
You're trying to make it fancy.
I think they've been in Jarden less than a week. I think that's pretty clear. And I think...
Okay.
Wait, what's the 3 days?
That story-wise...
Day 1 is Evie disappeared.
Yeah. Day 1, Evie disappears. Day 2, we get a little bit of the moving forward. With their searching for Evie. Day 3, all of this is happening right now.
I don't think so. I think it's been a couple weeks at this point, because if it had only been a few days, I don't think the search would have ended yet. They're saying funding has run out. Funding doesn't run out after a few days. Funding runs out after a few weeks.
We also have seen what's gone on with Matt, which we can discuss later, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a few weeks also.
Even Matt's been out there for at least a week or two.
He's got a nice tan going on, so I feel like that's some serious sun time.
What I'm saying is our progression. Not actual days. I meant figurative days. I should have said episodes.
I still don't know what you mean
I like
by
you
that.
so much. I really don't know what you're saying.
I should have said episodes that, if we were to follow linear without flashing backwards, this would really only be episode 3.
I have no idea.
Next in line.
We have to move on from
all right,
this.
yeah.
Just following the Garveys.
We need to analyze this episode, not Steve's statements.
Fascinating as they are.
And I want to get into the real... I want to start off because one of the things that I think this podcast can be really great for is digging into the... I'm gonna call it the science of the departure. When I say science, I don't just mean chemicals and all that. I mean everything that is just analyzing how this happened, what happens, is it going to happen again, all of those questions.
So when you say science, you may be referring to the demon Azrael. May or may not.
The funniest thing I think this show has done. It was a great moment.
Terrific.
But it also feels very real to this world that we're in. I mean, these people are nuts, but if you are a scientist, somebody gets it.
Everyone in the chat understands Steve. Everyone. They're all going like, yeah, Steve,
Look,
totally.
I'm still reeling from this episode, so
I've had the day.
Yeah, I'm still wrapping myself around Azrael.
Yeah.
But I think basically, if you're a scientist in this world, and then something unexplainable happens, at the beginning of last season, we dealt with the 2 years out scientific committee hearing at the Senate, weirdly led by Creed Bratton, if you remember that. And they basically, it was the scientists saying, we have no ideas. We don't know. So if you're a scientist and you've run out of explanations as far as your science can teach you, and people and everyone around you is saying it's the Rapture, look at this book, it's got the answers, maybe you start to try to apply scientific research to demons and stories like that.
Which is, again, we'll get to it, but exactly what Erica ended up doing.
Yep.
Not believing in God. This is something that happened that science can't explain. So putting your scientific explanation into religion. We see it throughout this entire show.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's the beauty of this, is that, like, is watching people be forced to re-examine everything that they believe. If you think of science as a form of religion with a little bit more, with chemicals as your Bible, as opposed to chemicals and physics are your Bible, as opposed to a book that somebody gave you to read. This upends it.
Yeah.
Just like science is upending a lot of stuff, that the way people read the Bible. So how do you go from there? And that's sort of what we're seeing people deal with in this. The other big thing in this episode was the DSD made a reappearance.
Really cool to see how Nora interacts with somebody that was part of the same tribe that she was, part of the same department, versus how she interacts with somebody who, like, essentially attacks her and is trying to wave what looked like almost a gun at her before. I thought that she was gonna snap the DSD's head off when he was walking in the street. She's like, "Who are you?" as he comes up to her, but she was really nice to him because she's lived through that. She's had that job before.
Well, it's also it's a matter of just politeness, and, like, even as crazy lady Azrael's servant, I guess, I don't know how to call her, said about Dr. Quarto from the beginning, like, he's just not approaching it right. Like,
her name was Allison Herbert.
Dr. Allison Herbert. Also, there's not a very tactful way to approach that. I kind of like the way he did.
I'm Dr. Quarto.
Fair enough.
Can I take some readings? That's it.
But you can't just like probe somebody like that.
I feel like he wouldn't have gotten any readings with that. I'm not saying he was right socially. I'm saying he got some readings the way he went about it before being thrown off the porch. He went for broke. He got some readings.
I mean, take readings of the house and everything. You can't point a scientific instrument at somebody without their permission.
Yeah.
I would look at somebody and say, listen, I know that you might think that this is BS, but I don't. And if you think it's BS, that's totally fine. Do you mind if I take some readings for myself?
There you go. That's a perfectly logical and reasonable approach.
Right.
Maybe
you don't
he
have to
just-
believe this.
Maybe he just knew that Nora was gonna say no, so he's like, I gotta get this really quick before she yells at me. And
Look at how Nora dealt with the MIT guys who bought her house.
Yeah.
Yes, they were offering a ridiculously large amount of money for her to sell her house, and that helps any situation like that.
Yeah.
But they approached it calmly. They stated why they were there, what they were trying to do, and why they wanted to do it, and she respected them and agreed with them, just like she did with this guy from the DSD.
I have a ridiculous theory on the $3 million house, on the $3 million for her house.
2.7.
The 2.7, and then her say that she got an absurd amount of money that she could move anywhere. If MIT already thought she was a lens, they could have given her enough money to, like, let's see where she goes.
Do you think they thought she was going to go to Miracle?
Or they thought she was going to go somewhere and do something, maybe, and I guess they had so much money because there's publicly funded research to figure out what happened, that it's a possibility that regardless, because I think all these scientists are grasping at straws just like everyone is, and that's the hopelessness that is this universe we watch.
Well, they're putting together theories, and I thought it was one thing I really liked in this episode that it's starting to give us is the idea that people are starting to find more patterns with different algorithms, with different things. They hint that the Japanese got a good algorithm going. That's what the new test is based on.
These questions were a little different tonight. Some of them I think were the same, but we didn't get the do you have milk with your cereal in the morning, or do you like Pop-Tarts, whatever
well,
they
we
were.
didn't finish the test, so
we
those
didn't
may
even-
still be there. But
We
there
missed
are
the
new
start of it
questions.
too.
Yeah.
He says there are new questions. He says that they have been doing research and they feel like these questions are closer. I would have to assume you would find some sort of, like you said, pattern. So maybe we are getting closer to figuring this all out, or at least that's what they believe.
Or
Yeah,
at
I think they
least-
just think that. I feel like.
Yeah, it's possible.
Or at least
It's possible too.
that's a very human response, where if something happens that you can't explain and you have the means, you're going to try to explain it.
Well, the first step looking inside science is correlation, but correlation does not imply causation. So just because everyone had a bowl of cereal that day does not mean that it's because of the cereal that they left.
How do you guys feel about this lens theory?
Very interesting.
Had never crossed my mind. I feel like I
Makes
have
a lot of
thought
sense
about
now.
every theory I could think about on this show. Never crossed my mind.
You can start to tear it apart into a more theoretical, more religious aspect. Absolutely, like the idea. I mean, and it's devastating, I think, for Nora to hear the idea, because just like she talked to Erica about at the end of the episode, the feeling of blame, the feeling that you might be responsible for this. If you consider the lens thing something about your soul, and it's something so just native to you as a person that you can't shed it, it's just a part of who you are, and that part of who you are is what is causing people to go away. That plays into the idea of predestination a lot, that the show is sort of like touched on a little bit, and that was this going to happen, or if you had taken a 2-step to the right, would everything have been turned out differently?
I think that's just the very human element. Also, I think if we do subscribe to the lens theory, Kevin's definitely a lens.
That's what Malevolent Cure says
Yes.
in the chat.
That
I don't know if that's true, considering what happened with Nora's family. I don't think Kevin could be used to explain why Nora's whole family departed.
well, no, I'm saying who he was with
But
at the
why-
he was,
There's
because-
multiple lenses,
'cause-
right?
Yeah, that
that's
he
the
was
theory.
literally with a woman who departed.
But that was one person. Like, why him
He's
over
not
anyone else?
He's not as strong a lens as Nora. Maybe I don't actually buy into the theory, but if we were to buy into the theory, that's where the credence would be. That both Nora and Kevin are lenses, and that they found each other. It's silly,
Yeah.
but it's all kind of silly. You
So
gotta just jump out there. So romantic.
I mean, Roxy, what do you think? Do you buy into it?
I think that there's a lot of legitimacy there. I think that based on what's happened, I don't believe that that's the route the show will go, but I think that they've finally offered a theory that I can grasp, that makes sense. Like, this is within people, and something about that causes other people to depart. I don't really know. I don't think they've fully fleshed out the lens theory, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because then, like, why did it take so long for this whole depart? Like, the whole idea of the lens thing is just like, why didn't people disappear earlier if they were always a lens, or did they?
Or there was the event, but the certain people, the lenses, were somehow anchors to the event. That the event would happen to people that were closer to those people. Like I said, I don't buy it. I think it's arbitrary and kind of nihilist. I think it just happened fairly randomly.
Yeah, I mean, it there's so many different. It really depends on what you think caused it, or whether it was just a natural event. Could the departure be the reason the dinosaurs went extinct?
Right.
Did the dinosaurs depart, and that's where they went?
I think that it's difficult for me because I share a lot of the same characteristics as Nora, in the sense that I try to be very pragmatic about things. So when Nora is eventually talking to Erica and trying to deal with all this, she says terrible things happen in the world, and the only comfort we get is that we didn't cause them. That's something that I definitely live by. I think that that's true. And if you start to question that, and you're that kind of person, I think you're totally screwed. So I would get why Nora would be so hasty to believe that this is an actual departure. I think that it would mean a lot of different things for the show if we do find out that this wasn't a second departure. If somehow we find Evie and the rest of the girls, everybody's going to be back on Team Nora.
But I think that's why we got that laugh cry from her at the angel, or the demon Azrael.
Demon Azrael.
Although Azrael's an archangel, it's actually very complicated. But we got that laugh cry.
Demons, angels, they're not so different.
We got that laugh cry from her because I think up until that moment, she was kind of believing. Because she was part of the DSD and she kind of believes in the questionnaire, and then they sent her an article that has the data, and she was skeptical, but I think she was like, there might be a secondary departure, I might be a lens. And then the same scientists call her, like, by the way, we think you're possessed by a demon involuntarily. We need to take you to a lab, and we have funding to do it.
It's like they sound so good up until the word demon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so
do you guys think anybody was watching this show though and heard that and was like, "That's totally legitimate"?
I hope not.
The demon, yeah.
Well,
why is she laughing?
But some people want answers so much that they'll believe something like that's
Well,
to a certain extent the idea of religion, that it's like, you know what, that makes enough sense that I can accept that as fact and then wake up every morning without the weight of every question imaginable.
I think that there are absolutely people watching this show who are looking at it, thinking of it as the rapture by God, the biblical Judeo-Christian God as we know him, as the Bible tells, and this is the end of days. This is the apocalypse. And this
Matthew Vita in the chat says Team Demon. We've even got one here.
I mean, look, I spent 2 years covering the show Dominion that was on Sci-Fi, which specifically was about angels and demons and all that lore. I love that lore. I don't think that's what's happening here. To me, this is a show about where, if I want to believe that it's the science aspect of the show, I think is about where religion and science overlap and how that works. What is the larger goal? Like, not God as a thinking, thoughtful being who is making decisions, but God as a force who, based on how, like, what you do in your life that may or may not affect some scientific part that we call the soul. What does that do to you and you move forward? And maybe as the I'm going off the top of my head here, but as the universe flexes, expands, contracts, things are going to happen, and the way that your soul has been affected by how you lived your life, you are affected differently by the universe's contractions.
Therefore causing you to depart?
Depart or not to depart.
Depart, or just something that you can't explain happens to you. And it actually kind of mirrors the idea of science and religion, and what a primitive person would or wouldn't believe. It kind of comes back to the way this season opened. Because someone lives in a cave, and we now know it was an earthquake that they left the cave. An earthquake shifted
that.
I know, right? An earthquake shifted the rocks, and now you're presumably locked out of the only world you knew. To that primitive cave woman, she didn't know it was an earthquake. She didn't know it shifted the rocks. She could have thought a bird did it. She could have thought any other logical thing that her brain could comprehend. And I think that's the illusion they're giving us, is that you could explain the departure.
Yeah. Roxy, did you have a thought?
Well, I remember earlier on they told us that cave woman would be coming back in some way, which would be interesting to see. But what I was initially going to ask was something from the chat, which I think is worth asking, from Jamie Alderizo. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Would you guys be okay with them finding Evie and the girls dead? I would be satisfied by that. Would you guys be okay with that?
Closure, yeah.
I mean, the idea of it doesn't bother me, if that's the question. I would need to know everything that led to their death and how they vanished in the way that they did.
But would that be, you said closure, Kelly, do you feel like that would be too much closure? Because this show usually likes to leave things open-ended. Would you want that kind of closure?
I kind of would, because I hope it's not a second departure, just for, like, Nora. I feel I'm Team Nora, but I just want to, and I don't want there to be more departures. I just like the idea of it revolving over that one event. So I think I would like to find them dead or whatever, just so that's a separate thing.
I like the idea of everyone bugging out about a second departure, and then we just find these girls somewhere.
I think it's
Or that
almost
these girls ran away.
it's almost more frightening if there isn't a second departure, if this was a one-time event, because if this starts happening, you can almost explain it more. The more times that there is a departure,
You start to be able to look for more evidence.
right?
But it's also terrifying because nobody's safe. Like, you could just disappear, you know?
It's true.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, that would definitely make this, take the show in a different direction, which I think could be a lot of fun, or when I say fun, just very interesting television to watch.
Any direction, they're setting themselves up so wonderfully right now, because whatever direction we go in, I'm in for.
Yeah.
I'm not like, ooh, if we go down that path, I'm not coming. I'll go whatever path they want to take me down. I'm just gonna blindly wander.
Yeah, whereas last season, I know I was very much on the page of like, I need answers or I will not be satisfied. This season, I still want answers as to how the departure worked and why it happened. I still want them, but I don't need them the same way. I'm enjoying this for the characters.
Yeah.
And I get to have the fun of my crazy theorizing around the departure as well. Which I want to do to get us into talking more about Erica real quick. My theory based on what she did here, what she said in this episode, when she's talking to Nora, she talks about how I wished that she'd be okay without me, and then she vanished. My crazy theory, not saying that's necessarily the way it's going, but if her prayer worked, if the prayers of her really
the
worked,
miracle of Jordan.
then I pray that she'll be happy without me. What if the only
be
way
okay without me.
be okay without me? What if the only way for her to really be okay is to be on this alternate plane that I've talked about before? My theory that there's 2 Earths now, and the other Earth lost 98% of the population, and it's 2% trying to survive. I think I talked about it more last season than this season.
We don't
but
have
that's
the
my
time.
crazy theory. And then imagine the other side of this, where 3 people just appear.
I think you need to think, if we're gonna believe this wish to be true, that this is why her girls departed. These 3 girls departed because she wished that. You need to think of this wish literally, which is, I wish she'd be okay without me. That's not saying if she ever had to be without me that she'd be okay. She actually wished that she could be without her and that she would be okay.
But that doesn't explain the other 2 girls disappearing. I feel like.
No, it doesn't.
But,
unless we go to the other moms. What were their names? Who they
Emily and
Emily was
Loretta
drunk,
and Loretta.
The Real Housewives of Jordan.
I don't know what about Emily and Loretta made me want to sock them both in the face so bad, but I really just did. But unless we go to them and we find out similar stories, or because they were with Erica, the same thing happened, I'm not holding that much weight to this. I think what's more interesting is that Nora must have been bugging out here, because we know from Nora's past that she was having the similar thoughts about her kids when her kids and her husband disappeared, that I don't remember what exactly it was, but that she wished that she could just have some peace and quiet or something, or she wished that she could be alone for a little, whatever it was. So I think she was probably feeling a lot of guilt. She's trying so hard to make this seem like it's not true, but everything keeps coming up, and she's overcompensating. She looks at her, she's almost mean to her. This poor woman just lost her daughter, and Nora's almost mean to her.
Yeah, I mean, Nora's trying to give her some tough love. She's like, I need to tell you how it is. Because I think Nora's saying, how people mostly give advice is you say what you think you would want to hear. Unless you know the person well, and then you can talk to what they need to hear. But mostly you try to say, if I was in your shoes, what would I want to hear? What would I want to be told? And Nora very much has been in her shoes, but she doesn't know Erica that well. And so the tough love does not work out.
What do we say about the fact that this bird lived? 3 days, bird lived, that's fact.
Maybe she didn't quite bury it enough. If we want to try to explain it away,
Maybe somebody found it and it's actually a different bird.
maybe Grandpa.
Well, I think
Maybe she just thought it was 3 days.
It's one of Virgil's miracle
Got
birds.
the math wrong.
You think she got the math
No,
wrong.
I'm just kidding.
You think that Virgil came through, and you think she didn't bury it right. So none of us are giving it couldn't possibly be.
From a scientific standpoint, I don't have enough data to come to a proper conclusion. Which I think a lot of scientists in this world have been saying for years upon years.
But she's right. It's a small box. There's no way that the bird could have survived. Either there's 2 explanations. Either somehow the bird there was a way that the bird was given more air, either by improper burial or by a person digging the box up and putting a new bird in or letting it out.
Or number 2, there was a miracle in Miracle.
Yes. And it can't be both.
Or number 3, that she counted the days wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a valid theory.
Yeah.
I mean, she's going through a lot. She's getting ready
saying.
She's going through a lot. She's getting ready to leave her husband. It's not that ridiculous for her to
Be stressing out.
Kevin loses days all the time.
Yeah, like to
That's
just be
true.
stressing out. Like, was that yesterday? No, that was. I'll just check the bird.
But to be fair, that works the other direction.
Yeah.
He doesn't add in days.
Yeah.
Where it's like been 10 hours and he's like, man, it's been like 4 days. I should go check on that bird.
Yeah.
Also, ROFL Buzzy in our chat. The story that she tells herself is to put the blame on her. It's just a coincidence. I side on that side. That people like to make sense of things that are that otherwise don't make sense.
Yes. The reason that I apply all the crazy stuff that I'm talking about is I like the idea that there is an almost scientific way to measure spiritual things. The way that they affect us, positivity, negativity.
If we're going to go that route, there's a way to measure this. Everybody in Miracle agrees with you, Zach. We got the freaking goat killer. We got the girl in the wedding dress. Like, all of these things that they're chalking up to, you have to do these exact same things, the 9,261, in order for it to stay the same. This is like a cult of a town.
Yeah, I mean, that is a crazy... But I totally get the logic there.
Yeah.
Because, like, I've definitely done it with, like... Boil it down to something simple, sports events. That I've definitely been the kind of guy who's like, oh man, when I was shuffling those red poker chips, they totally just won the game, and only when I was shuffling did they do something good. So I sit there every game shuffling those poker chips.
I agree, and sometimes I think you start doing something like that, you don't even realize that you're going to just keep doing it, and then after you put on your wedding dress the second day, the third day, the fourth day, then you're just that girl who's in the wedding dress, like, and that just becomes your thing.
Well, I think in our world that's superstition, whereas in that world it's like, I better just put on a wedding dress every day.
But
Isn't that still superstition?
Yes,
but that's the difference. Is like I stopped doing the poker chips thing because it's a baseball game. I don't need to keep doing that because it's baseball and it doesn't matter. But when people are disappearing, effectively, as far as we're concerned, dying, you subscribe to your superstitions a lot more strongly, and that's sort of what this town is dealing with. I'm curious, just to go back to Erica. I want to talk about her and we're supposed to believe is her father.
I think it's her father-in-law.
Father-in-law.
That was my interpretation. I think it's John's dad. John's
Okay.
the one who shot him, and I think that John would be more likely to shoot his own father than Erica's, and that's literally the only reason I'm saying that.
Okay.
So I don't know.
No other reason, Roxy?
We know he's family.
Yeah, we know he's family. We don't know what.
I vote Erica's father just because you have to pick one.
It seemed like her father the way that it played, but people are close to their in-laws. So a lot of people treat their in-laws like their actual parents once they're married. So very much it could go either way.
He's definitely family.
But what do you think he did at this point? We know he did something that that is unforgivable.
Well, we know that he asked for forgiveness and that Erica deemed it to be unforgivable.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I would have to assume that it had to do with getting shot. So either he was trying to break in or he was trying to steal from somewhere and John was working for the fire and had to shoot him or whatever it is. Something with the shooting experience.
I don't have
Think it
enough.
happened with on the departure day, or it's just been
No, because John was in prison during the departure,
okay.
right?
I think so.
That seems.
Yeah.
So
He
why does
wasn't
it mean
in Jordan for the departure, right?
Why couldn't it have been on the? Is there no prison in Jordan?
Not that we've seen, but it's out of 5,000 people, most likely wouldn't have a prison.
They would have
a local sheriff's office with a jail at most.
But if you got sentenced, you'd go to prison, and then the state of Texas would run that prison.
Yeah.
So he went to jail prior. I mean,
He was
you
in jail at the moment. He was in prison at the moment of departure.
Okay.
That is, I believe, what we have been told at
Correct.
this point. So I guess Kelly. I think you were saying we don't have enough to go on. We don't. I mean, we're just wildly theorizing at this point. But I don't think he murdered anyone. I wonder if he dropped Evie and that's when she got epilepsy, or when they found the epilepsy, or something like that, where they're blaming him
Or
for
he
something.
got weird. It would fit the theme more with how John just hates the idea of miracles that he got really, really religious. Maybe he thought he was a healer and tried to cure Evie, and John was like, get away from my child. I'm being logical. Get away from my child. And then once again, straws.
What do you guys think about this? We got some more about John and his hatred, or how he behaves to people who are spreading miracles and miracle. He beat up a guy for selling water who didn't, as far as I can tell, didn't claim it did anything. He just like, here is the water.
Well, that was Dr. Lovegood from the first episode.
And then he took his palm print.
Because he didn't, because that guy essentially lost his job, because his job was to take water samples, and then that whole lake dried up.
Yep.
But that does tie up one loose end for us who think that he kidnapped those girls.
How is that tied?
Because he probably didn't if John can find him.
I mean, he could have like a hidden hut or something somewhere with those girls.
It was already a stretch that Dr. Lovegood did this, but for us to see him again makes it less likely.
Yeah, from the pilot, for anyone who doesn't remember. And then but then, as Erica points out in her explosion at the, Roxy, don't worry, we'll talk about that. I saw what you were circling on your paper. When Erica explodes, she calls out John for basically picking and choosing. Why don't you stop this guy from killing goats everywhere? Why don't you stop this girl from wearing her wedding dress everywhere? They're perpetuating miracle, the idea that this is a miracle just as much as anyone else.
Makes perfect sense.
She's got a point.
We're starting to see cracks in their relationship too, especially what we hear about her trying to leave him.
Yeah, I guess though maybe with the wedding dress, since they're not harming anybody else or like influencing anybody else,
or they're so absurd. There's a certain level, especially the wedding dress, that's not real selling of a miracle as much as I wear a wedding dress every day. This is kind of kooky. I'm number 13. Whereas handprints or selling water for an absurd markup.
This is what she says to him today. You need to hit people because you need to hit people. That says so much about John that's what his wife thinks. To me, that sounded like an abusive person.
Yeah.
I think that there's more to their relationship than we even know at this point.
Yeah. All right. So we're running low on time, so I want to make sure we get to all like the other big topics. So real quick, let's talk about Lori's quick phone call to Nora.
I forgot where Tommy was. I was like, what do you mean?
Well, last we saw Tommy, he was giving the hugs. Am I forgetting anything?
Yeah.
Like that's
yes.
So he was with her.
Yeah. So this must have happened after that, and I only say that because when he was kidnapped by Meg, if we wanted to do coinciding time, Lori wouldn't have known that he was kidnapped and gone, and wouldn't have freaked out as much. So this is definitely past that.
Yeah, this is new information.
Yes.
Hugger Tommy has disappeared.
Did he depart with Evie and the rest of them? Do we think that he's just run away? Is he taking care of Meg, who's pregnant with his child? I've got so many thoughts.
I mean, we're not going to have time to do predictions, so I'm just going to throw the stuff in here.
Yeah.
But I think Tommy was taken by I don't remember the name of it, but the government organization that was hunting Holy Wayne last year. I think they either, even if they're not going to hold him, I think they brought him in.
I think he joined with Meg. Maybe.
I think he bugged out and went to Australia, where his dad is, where David
Grandpa.
Burton is.
If he left on purpose, Jill knows where he is. Because Jill is always getting updated
Correct.
by Tommy. So if Jill doesn't know where he is, then we don't know where Tommy is. And he's been taken of some sort.
Sci-Fi Monkey thinks Tommy's with Meg.
Me too.
That's another good theory. That's another good theory, guys. All right. We got to talk about Kevin before we get out of here.
Yes.
Because that last scene was crazy. And to fill you guys in a little bit of how we watched it, our feed cut out the last 20 seconds and we had to go find another one. At a moment, I just want to give credit to the show because I freaked out when we lost the feed because it had been perfectly built this tension. I was freaking out for Kevin in this moment, and to lose and to not know I lost it.
Do you guys remember my one prediction last week was that Kevin was going to tell her this week about Patty? That was my one prediction, so I'm just
Nailed
saying.
it.
Yep. They obviously heard what I said and then wrote it in and then filmed it.
Yep.
That's what
Golf clap
happened,
for
clearly.
Roxy.
I love this scene. I love that we didn't really check in with Kevin that much throughout the episode, except for the fact when he left the baby outside and he was like, oh crap, I didn't mean to leave our baby outside.
Or clearly talking to Patty while he was tearing up the wallpaper.
Right, or when he noticed that Nora was stealing papers out of another person's bag and he was just kind of chill with it. But it wasn't Kevin's episode, and it usually is his episode.
Yeah.
So when we finally get to this moment, he's on the couch and he's like, we are talking now. I am doing this now. Oh my God. But him and Carrie Coon, just the whole thing, they're so good. They're so good.
They're great. They play off of each other fantastically. The scene in bed when they're I mean, because really for Kevin, I think it was those two moments. It was when they're getting intimate and they're like so in love in that moment, and so I'm sure it was something that Patty did that like makes him freak out and jump, and then coupled with leaving a baby outside in like scary times because there are children missing, regardless of what you think of them.
But it was crazy because we didn't see Patty. Not in that scene. Not in the, we weren't seeing Patty
It's a
tonight.
perspective
Do you
thing
think-
today. This is Nora's episode.
We didn't even see her at the very end. Like, this was Nora's perspective.
Do you think at the end Patty's really telling him that stuff, or he's like telling her something different?
No, I think she was really telling him that.
100%.
But that thought did cross my mind too.
Yeah, because I feel like she wanted him to tell her. So, but then now he's telling Nora, no, you didn't. She didn't want me to tell you.
You know Patty though. She does these mind games. Like
Yeah.
tell him. Oh,
think
you
there's
shouldn't have done that.
I think there's a perspective we may see next week where she's literally like all up
Yeah.
on Nora.
Yeah.
Because now that the fourth wall is completely broken between them, that it's like, oh no, only you can see me. That she'll like get right up in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And real close.
What about the fact that Erica threw a rock through the wall, through the frickin' window by the end of the episode?
Yeah,
When
this is
Kevin and
not
Nora are
good
there.
for the Garveys to
mutual
have
rocks.
those people against them. Because regardless of what Erica feels towards John or what John feels about what Erica did, he's going to defend her.
Oh yeah.
Yep. If anything, though, I will say the takeaway of this episode is for you men, and if you are seeing somebody visually, like you're having crazy,
phrasing.
do not phrase it. I'm seeing
So-
someone. And then repeat yourself. I am seeing someone. Not good. Ladies don't take that very
That
well.
was really funny.
No, like I'm seeing like a person,
Like a human being.
like where there shouldn't be a person.
It kind
I'm
of
crazy.
eases
It's
the
just
crazy
Phrasing.
though.
It was phrasing. Like I.
Kind of eases the crazy though, instead of being like I'm seeing like.
Although that is kind of.
You know, it's better like, oh, you're not cheating on me, you're just crazy.
Yeah.
It's a relief, you know?
Totally. You could see the relief in that moment.
Yeah.
Well, at least I'm not being cheated on. But wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go in the other room and collect my thoughts. All right. Just last things to name check. Jill and Michael building up some kind of relationship.
I loved that. When Jill was like, and by the way, I'm not asking, and Nora was like, and by the way, if you were, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
real,
like
I mean,
that.
it was real quick. There's not a lot there.
Here's what I think they're setting up. I think Erica's going to find out about Nora being a lens, and she's going to try to drive the Garveys out of town, which will
Interesting.
make this relationship very much a Romeo and Juliet-esque, can't be together kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I like it.
But they're going to get driven out of town.
And then last thing I want to just like mention real quick is Matt, and he's basically doing what we talked about last week in that he is slowly building a following and a little congregation of his own. He may not call it that, but that's what it is out in the camp.
Nora says, nobody does it like you, Matt. Amen, Nora.
Yep.
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 He's Matt Jameson is now cult leader.
Yes.
He is, regardless of what you think of it. That's what he's doing, and I'm excited to see more of that storyline. A lot of storylines next week. Looks crazy. We don't have time to talk about it. But so until then, trust me, next week we're going to have plenty of theories and craziness to talk about with you guys. But until then, Steve Kaufmann, where can people keep up with you?
People can find me right here, right now, but also on Twitter at Steve Kaufmann. That's Kaufmann. She keeps perpetuating this joke.
You guys can find me everywhere at Roxy Striar.
I'm Kelly McInerney. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HollyWeirdo.
And you can follow me on Twitter at @ZachWilson, ThatZachWilson. A whole bunch of shows here at AfterBuzz. You can find them on my Twitter. Guys, I'm Zach Wilson. Thanks for geeking out with us.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.